1665. Or 1666, apparently the man didn't make his 5s and 6s very distinguishable.
Fair enough.
So, that's what we know of its history.
Right.
Now, there's what we know of the book itself. There's not a lot more, really. We know how big the book is. We know that it has 240 pages collected into 18 quires. Quires are a measurement of paper, kind of like a ream, not in. But we also know that the exact number depends on how the manuscript's foldouts are counted. The quires have been numbered from 1 to 20 in various locations using numerals consistent with the 1400s. It was carbon dated back to the 1400s, 1410, 1450, somewhere in that time frame. And the top right-hand corner of each right-hand page has been numbered from 1 to 16 using numerals of a later date than the 1400. But just from gaps in the pages and gaps in the quires and numbers on the pages, it seems like at one point the book had at least 272 pages in 20 quires, some of which were already missing when Voynich bought the book. There's also evidence that the book's bifolios, which are sections of the book, were in a completely different order at one point. We know that that it's written on calf skin, and it's like 14 or 15 calf skins is what it takes took to write this book. And that the covers are that the cover is, I'm sorry, I've sort of lost that. Oh, goatskin. Goatskin binding and covers. But we know those aren't the original covers because there's insect holes on some of the pages, on the first and last pages. So that indicates that at one point it had a wooden cover. Mm-hmm. Also, because discoloration on some of the pages, we know that there was probably a leather binder that held the cover to the book. So at some point that was either removed or lost, and the goatskin cover was put on.
I see.
So that's really what we know about the book. We like I said, it's been carbon dated, so we know it dates back to the 1400s. Mm-hmm. We also know that the ink is appropriate for that time period, or that the inks that has been, and the paints as well. So it's not a modern forgery, or if so, it's the best one ever done, because where do you get calfskin that dates that far back that's still held together?
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we know it's not a forgery.
Mm-hmm.
Although that is a theory some people have, is that Voynich manufactured the book and he was going to claim it was written by Roger Bacon in order to inflate its value and therefore sell it. We also know that this handwritten book, a lot of the letters, mm-hmm. for lack of a better word, have been modified using darker ink over what was once a much lighter ink. And most of the language in the book, most of the words, mm-hmm. are unreadable because they're in this code. But there is some Latin that has been added at a later date. And we don't know if these are translations or notes.
Interesting.
Every page in the manuscript contains text. Most of them contain pictures, illustrations, which if you look at some of these, and like I said, that's why I included them, because there's a lot of plants. Plants are common, some real, some fictional, for lack of a better word. I don't want to say imaginary.
Well, can you really say fictional?
I'm going to say fictional because it describes a plant that doesn't exist. I mean, I guess maybe, possibly, it's, maybe they did exist once upon a time and we've simply lost them.
Well, I mean, that's definitely something that could happen. I mean...
But I don't know how well the book's been studied. I don't know.
Right.
Like, if botany experts have looked at it and said, no, these never existed, which I would take that. But what we know of the book, we know it contains, from the pictures and the way it's laid out, like it would be laid out like a book written at that time was, like a Farmer's Almanac kind of book.
Right.
And so we know a lot of it is herbal. We know that because each page in these sections displays one or two plants and a few paragraphs of text, format typical of European herbals at that time. Some parts of these drawings are larger and clearer copies of sketches seen in the pharmaceutical sections. None of the plants depicted are unambiguously identifiable. In other words, the way they're drawn, they could be several plants.
Right.
Some of it is astronomical. We know that because it contains circular diagrams suggestive of astronomy, astrology, some of them with suns, moons, and stars. One series of 12 diagrams depicts conventional symbols for the zodiac, constellations, two fish for Pisces, a bull for Taurus, that sort of thing. Each of these has 30 female figures arranged into two or more concentric bands. Most of the females are at least partly nude, and each holds what appears to be a labeled star, or is shown with the star attached to either arm by what could be a tether or a cord of some kind. Mm-hmm. There's a balneological section, which apparently has to do with bathing. I'm not sure. I didn't look up the word. If you'd like to, you can. But it's a dense, continuous text interspersed with drawings mostly showing small nude women, some wearing crowns, bathing in pools or tubs connected by an elaborate network of pipes.
How is that spelled?
Balneo, logical. Logical. There's also cosmological, more circular diagrams of an obscure nature. This section also has foldouts. One of them spans 6 pages, commonly called the Rosette's folio, and contains a map or what might be a diagram with 9...
The study of therapeutic bathing in medicinal springs.
Okay. So I was sort of right. That pharmaceutical section with drawings of isolated plant parts, roots, leaves, etc., objects resembling apothecary jars, ranging in style from the mundane to the fantastical, and a few text paragraphs. So that's what we have, what we can see. But again, we're dealing with a situation where the text has never been translated, so we can only guess at its purpose. The overall impression given by the surviving leaves of the manuscript is it was meant to serve as a pharmacopoeia or address topics in medieval or early modern medicine. But again, without knowing what's in the text, we really can't say. I mean, it's completely possible that it was written by one person and then colored on by like an older child, like a teenager that just got over it. It's like, I'm going to draw stuff.
True enough.
And maybe he got smacked for it. We don't know because making books back then was so different than it is now. Or that it's been for the last 100 years. Krysta is looking at an up-close version of one of the pictures.
The bathing women.
Ah, you found it. Okay. Yeah, I didn't...
I found several of them, but this is...
I was looking at the...
Gotcha. Yeah.
I was looking at the reading at the bottom.
Yeah, the text.
I'm seeing a lot of stuff. It looks like. D.
Wild, huh?
I thought I could see a couple words, but that just might be my brain making out stuff that isn't actually there.
Well, you're probably the scholars who have gone into this have probably done the same thing.
Jeez.
Yeah. So again, all we know of the book is that it was written. Is that the first owner we know about was George Baresh, and it is rumored that it was originally owned by King Rudolph II of Bohemia. But again, we don't know that for sure. We only have it in the letter.
Right.
So that's what we know.
Sure.
Everything else is pure speculation at this point. And man, a lot of people have been speculating.
Why have they?
And after this word from our sponsors, we'll talk about that. Alrighty. So,
welcome back.
Welcome back. Hopefully you enjoyed the message of our sponsors.
We feel very sponsored.
Yes, we do. Now, the largest, the biggest supposition is that it might have been written by Roger Bacon.
Roger Bacon.
So, who is Mr. Bacon? Because we've already established that he wasn't related to the Sandwich Brothers.
Roger Bacon is the guy that people will sometimes say that Shakespeare didn't write his own plays, that Roger Bacon did, which is crap. Let me just poop on that from a great height right now. Shakespeare wrote his own plays. You don't like that idea? Don't listen to the show. Shakespeare wrote his own plays. That is how strongly I feel about it. Shakespeare wrote Shakespeare. Bacon didn't have anything to do with it.
Okay.
Okay. That being said,
now that he's jumped on the soapbox, wiggled around, and lathered up,
showed my butt, yes.
Moving on.
One of the reasons that people think it might have been Bacon is because some people assume that John Dee sold the manuscript. But that's unlikely. And first of all, John Dee was sort of a spiritual consultant to Queen Elizabeth.
Okay.
Or not Elizabeth, but gotta go back. Anyway, he was known to be a scholar, and he was known to be quite into occult ideals. But he was also a big fan of Bacon and collected his work. But Dee also kept meticulous diaries and mentioned nothing about it. So
gotcha.
Most people don't think Dee had anything to do with it.
Mm.
Yeah, he was the mathematician astrologer of the court of Queen Elizabeth I of England. So, yeah, he was known to have owned a lot of Bacon's manuscripts, and that's another thing, is that some people think, well, maybe Dee and Edward Kelly, and Edward Kelly was his
right-hand dude.
It was like he was his personal spiritualist. Like, in metaphysical matters, he turned to Kelly.
I see.
And so a lot of people think that maybe Dee and Kelly wrote it with the intention of selling it as a Bacon thing. But again, none of that is mentioned in Dee's writings, in his diaries. So you think he'd mention, maybe he might not mention, hey, we're about to scam some people, but you'd think hey, working on the Bacon piece or something like that, you know, or he'd mention working on the coded manuscript. It's not in there.
Mm.
Some people suspect Voynich himself of having fabricated the manuscript as an antique book